The man-eater, or great white shark, is probably the most dangerous of all the sharks. But this chemical placed in the water may prevent the shark from feeding on its victim. Stay tuned to Science in Action and learn the reason why.
On my office door at Steinhardt Aquarium, there is a rather interesting background for this sign. It happens to be the saw from a sawfish, which in life measured some 14 feet. That sawfish, however, was rather small compared with some of the larger members of this group. This one measured 31 feet and weighed 5,700 pounds. Now, the sawfish finds that the saw is very, very important. These teeth along the side are very sharp, and in their sharpness, they aid the sawfish in obtaining its food. Now, if I take this small one, I think I can show you just how the sawfish does that. It uses the saw like a two-handed sword, and as it swims through a school of fish, it threshes back and forth like this and catches fish on the side here. And those fish that are caught by the spines later then are picked up by the sawfish and used as food. We don't have a sawfish for you, but we have the next best thing, its cousin, which happens to be a guitarfish. And the guitarfish, if I were to attach a sword at this point, or a saw, the guitarfish would then look very much like the sawfish. For all practical purposes, it would be the same. Now, both the guitarfish and the sawfish belong to the overall group of cartilaginous fishes, which includes many monsters of the deep. The giant sharks, the giant skates, and the giant stingrays. Now, all of these fishes have several things in common. One of the characteristics, however, that we shall first consider is this matter of the kind of supporting structure for the body. We have a bony skeleton. This fish skeleton here of a common triggerfish is also made of bone. Most fish skeletons are of this kind. Here is a skull from a giant tuna. It is also of heavy bone, and if I attempted to cut this on the side, I'd have quite a time trying to get through this. But if I tried to do the same thing to the cartilage found in the sharks and the skates and the stingrays, I wouldn't have so much trouble. This is a skull of a small shark along our coast, and notice what happens now. I can cut through this without any trouble at all. Very shortly, I have two parts to that skull, as you see there. So then we have two basic fundamentals that are involved in these groups of fishes. The cartilage fishes have supporting structure through the body of cartilage. The bony fishes have the supporting structure of bone. I think we can carry this out a little bit further by means of this next model. Let's assume that this model now is of a very primitive bony fish. It has a bony skeleton, perhaps it could be a sucker. It has a mouth on the lower side of the body here, pectoral fin in position, these fins down here, the dorsal fin, and the tail. Now, if we wanted to change this fish to a cartilaginous fish, the first thing obviously we'd have to do is change the skeleton. So let's assume that we can change the skeleton to a cartilage skeleton. Now, if it becomes a shark, we'll have to change the tail. This is not suitable for a shark, so let's move that. The tail of the shark is of this type, and of course is more suitable for the kind of life that the shark carries out. If we examine the tail of a leopard shark, we find that the tail is lopsided. The upper lobe of the tail is much longer than the lower lobe. Now, coming back to our model once again, we travel on down the body of our fish that is quickly becoming a shark, and we find here at the gill area that the bony fish has a gill covering over the gills. The water comes in the mouth, goes over the gills, and comes out this area right here. The shark has to have something better, and so he replaces that with a series of gill openings, usually 5, occasionally 6, sometimes 7. And so this is the structure now that we find in the leopard shark. If we examine his gill area, we see that there are 5 gill openings up and down the side. And while we're looking at this leopard, notice also that the pectoral fin or the arm fin is very broad and expanded, and that it is in position below the gill area. Coming back to our model, we see that we have the same relationship. The gills are here, the pectoral fin is down here. Now, if we want to make a skate or a ray out of this fish, we've got to change this. We've got to drop the gills down. We've got to move the pectoral fin up here. Well, actually, by means of our model, we can do that very quickly. And let me just put this back in. And let's assume at the same time that we expand this pectoral fin so that it's very broad and wide. Now we have a tremendous pectoral fin that goes all the way down the body. And notice that down right in here, our gill openings are now on the underside of the fish. Well, that's fine for the pectoral fin, but now we find that our shark tail is not sufficient, so let's drop down the body here and change this tail and give us one that will give us a little bit more stability with this kind of a body. So we put in an elongate tail with two little fins at this point here. When we examine the living skate, we find that we have this same general arrangement. We're looking at the underside. That slit at the top is his mouth. The gill openings are on either side. You can see them there, 5 on each side, opening to the outside as we see there. And then when we turn this fellow over in the back, we see that he's a different color there. A little bit slippery, it's hard to hold on to. He's dark on the upper surface and light on the undersurface, and then as we slide down towards the end of the tail, that's a rather spiny tail, so we have to wear gloves on it one hand, we can see these two very small finlets which aid the skate in going in the direction that it wants to go. Now, the skates are not too far away, zoologically, from the rays, the whip rays and the stingrays. But to have that kind of an animal, we'll have to take away these two little fins right at the top of the tail. I'll just pull those off. And I'll add a very long, sort of a rat-like filamentous tail here, if I can find this. Ah, there it goes in there. This gives better balance. It's like flying a kite. The longer tail you have in a heavy wind, the better the kite does. And then we're going to add something at this point, which is very, very important if you happen to be a bat stingray. In other words, you have to have a stinger right at this point. So now if we examine the bat stingray, we'll see that that's exactly what he has. Right down there towards the end of the body is an elongate and very sharp spine. And if you happen to come in contact with that, you will find that if the venom gland is there, you may spend a couple of weeks in bed, in the hospital, or on crutches. If we remove that spine and clean it and examine it carefully, we find that it now takes on a whitish color, sort of bonish in characteristic, and when I run my hands up and down the side, it's very sharp. It slips very without too much, it catches. You notice, you see how that does? Well, the reason for that is there are many sharp saw-like teeth, and those two ridges which you see in there are the ridges where the venom glands are held in position. Now let's imagine we can take a section of this, and of this section we will make a tremendous model and look at the arrangement of that venom gland, and that's what we have right here. In other words, we cut through this, and you can see now that here is the center spine. Here are the venom glands in those ridges. Now this is the way the stingray spine is before the stingray has struck at anything. Now the minute he strikes at something, he loses all this outside covering. Now I'll just stand this up here and show you what happens. All this outside skin pulls off. If he happens to strike someone in the foot, all of this outside covering pulls off, and these venom glands with it, so that all of this material generally ends up in the wound. And that's why a wound of this kind can be quite dangerous. First thing that you have to do is get this venom gland out of the wound. Now, all stingrays don't have this venom gland attached to the spine. Dr. Findlay Russell down in Los Angeles has made a survey of some 4,000 stingrays, and he found that about 45% of them did not have this intact. They had lost the venom gland and the material over the outside, so as a result, a person stung with a stingray of that kind would not receive any venom. He'd only receive a laceration, and that, of course, would be much simpler. Now, we have two stingrays over here that are common on the Pacific coast. The little fellow right down here is the round stingray, and he's the one who actually causes the most damage because more people step on this one than do step on this larger bat ray over here. Now, I have a model leg, and I don't know what luck I'll have here with it, but I'll see if I can demonstrate what happens. A person comes out in a muddy area, perhaps on a mud flat or a sandy area, and he comes in and he steps on one of these stingrays, and if the stingray responds, he may actually throw his tail to the side. If it happens to be a round ray, he's kicking a little bit. Let's see what this fellow does here. I'll come over to the bat ray. The bat ray generally throws his tail directly up over the top of the head. I think I'll show you how this thing works. I'll demonstrate it mechanically. This comes up like this, and then that spine directs itself forward, comes up like this, and then the spine drives right into the leg, as you see there. Now, if the venom gland is there, then, of course, the person is going to have some trouble. But if the venom gland is missing, then it will not be too serious. However, a leg injury is never really serious, but if this spine were to hit a person in the abdomen, there'd be considerable trouble. In fact, there are records of stingrays actually having killed people in a short period of time of 2 hours. For example, this stingray killed a 12-year-old boy, as a result of the stinger spine entering the abdomen. And these, of course, are small animals compared with some of the other giants in this group. The manta reaches the size of some 25 feet from tip to tip, and reaches a weight of almost 2 tons. I think we'll leave these here for just for the present now, because the next thing I wanted to mention about is the records of mortalities that we've had on such things as shark bites. Now, on this map we have recorded here all of the areas where these have taken place. Now, let's start over here, way over here in the Indian area. You see, these are sharks that go from saltwater up into freshwater. That happens in this area here. Up in here, lots of shark attacks and mortalities. Down through here, Red Sea and the Mediterranean, down South Africa. This is an area now where they're having a lot of trouble, off South Africa. Some areas over here, some problems. The coast of South America coming up in the Caribbean. Notice all these. These are recorded shark mortalities. We come over on the west coast, we have a few down in this part of South America. Come up in here, we have a few, and up in this area also. Notice right here, 2 white crosses. That indicates freshwater sharks that live entirely in freshwater. The famous Lake Nicaragua shark is an example of that, one of the most dangerous sharks in the world. Someday we hope to have that to show you on this program. Coming over in the Pacific, a lot of areas in here around the Hawaiian Islands. Over in this part of the world, quite a number. And down to Australia, we find the area where more shark mortalities have been recorded than at any other place. Well, now, what kinds of sharks are we concerned with that are dangerous to humans? We have a total of about a dozen. And on the top of the list of this dozen, we find this fellow right here. This is the great white shark, known more commonly as the man-eater. When we come down to this part of the animal, we see that he has a rather distinctive mouth, somewhat pointed nose, come down the body here, a short pectoral fin, a rather normal dorsal fin, and then as we come down to this point, we see something a little bit different on this tail fin. The tail fin is fairly symmetrical. You remember the leopard fin we looked at a while ago was lopsided, a big long fin. So whenever you see this mark on the end of a shark, if you happen to be skin diving and you see this, my suggestion to you is get out of the water as quickly as you can, because this is the mark of the mackerel shark group. The man-eater and a number of others in this same family are all of them very, very dangerous sharks, and whenever you see these, the best thing to do is get out of the water immediately. They're fast-swimming sharks, and they take the name from the mackerels and from the tunas. Now, the other extreme beyond that is what we find in this shark right here. This is a shark that some people have considered to be dangerous. However, it's a rather harmless shark, small mouth, and notice this very long pectoral fin. As we swing down and look at the pectoral fin, we see that it's a very elongated affair. It gives it excellent stability. It's an extremely fast shark, but it gets its name from this tail. The tail is about 1/3 to a half the total length of the entire body. This is the thresher shark, one of the fastest of all the sharks. The tail is used to help the shark in rounding up schools of fishes. They swim around these schools of fishes, bring the school into a small compact ball, and then proceed to feed upon the school. They're very good to eat, and in fact quite often are used commercially. Now, these sharks actually are fairly small compared with the largest sharks that we know anything about today. Our largest shark is the whale shark. This reaches a length of something like 60 feet. There's a large school of these located in the Gulf of California and also in the Red Sea. The second largest shark is found commonly off Southern California. It's the basking shark, maximum length around 40 to 45 feet. The largest shark ever caught in San Francisco Bay was a basking shark which accidentally swam into a submerged boat area in Hunters Point. It was measured something like 19 feet. These, however, are small compared with this extinct form which was put together at the American Museum many years ago. This was a fellow that measured somewhere around 100 feet in length when it was alive at that many years ago. Now, when you examine the dental structure of sharks, you find very quickly that each shark has its own distinct type. The same as we have our own distinct fingerprints, so the shark can be told by the kinds of teeth which he has. Now, the teeth start to grow from the inside. Actually, of course, you are on the inside, and I'm on the outside looking in. The teeth start to grow on the inside, and on this fellow we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 rows of teeth. They grow out to the outer surface. These are in use, but as they break, the others move out and take the place of the broken teeth. Always new teeth moving up into place. These teeth are for tearing. The And this is the sort of thing that you run into in sharks of this time. However, we have others that are members of this cartilaginous group which use their teeth for grinding. The bat stingrays and the skates. This is from a 142-pound bat stingray. Notice those big plates. This little fellow you see here came from a 4-pound individual, and it characteristically has the same appearance as the adult. One thing I'd like to mention is the fact that some sharks lay eggs, and some of them have the young born alive. The very primitive sharks, such as this horn shark, are among the egg layers. And you see they have 2 horns on the back of the body here. Hold still, hold still. Yeah, that's it. Come on over here. The reason the horn shark gets his name, sometimes called pig shark or bull shark, is from this most peculiar mouth structure. Notice the very strange appearance of this shark. About 6 species in the world, one occurs on the Southern California coast and a couple in Australia and at other places. The egg is an interesting spiral arrangement that has an incubation period of something like 8 months. Only one has been hatched to my knowledge. The Scripps people down at La Jolla were able to hatch one several years ago. Wherever you find sharks, you find that they're very, very tough, and when you handle them, you have to be very, very careful. Now, usually fishermen will shoot large sharks through the brain cavity before they bring them aboard. Occasionally, however, they don't do that. And if the shark is one that is very, very strong, there may be some difficulty. Notice that it's a pointed nose shark and that it has a mackerel-like tail. In other words, this is one of that dangerous groups that I mentioned to you a little bit earlier. Very tough and very rugged. Seems to be taking some of the rigging there. I'm not sure just what's happening. You notice everyone stands aside to let the shark do whatever he wants to do, and when he decides what that's going to be, why, then they'll come back and do something about it. Looks like half of the rigging's gone there now. There he goes, and half of the netting too on top of that. Now, one of the very important problems if you happen to be in the water and there are sharks in the area is how to keep those sharks away from you. The Navy has been concerned about this problem, and so very recently they called a conference in New Orleans, and they invited all of the shark specialists from all over the world. 2 conclusions reached there I think are quite important. First of all, that we know too little about shark physiology. And secondly, that after we know more about this shark physiology, we have to develop some new shark repellents. Now, whenever you are out in a tropical reef area using face mask and flippers, you can be there perhaps all day long and never see a shark. But the minute you spear a shark, you take your spear, start out with gear like this, such as Gustav Della Valle is using here. He's one of the top spear fishermen in the world. Start after a barracuda, well, everything is fine, and you catch that barracuda you're spearing, and in a very, very short time, those sharks start showing up in the area. Now, the sharks have a rather particular pattern about the way in which they approach anything. All of them are inherently curious, and they come in the first round perhaps 20 feet away. They'll curve in here and go off, make a 1/4 of a mile circle, come back again, each time coming a little bit closer. Now, if you have a face mask, you can watch those sharks, and that is a definite advantage because you know that you're going to have to do something. But the really dangerous sharks perhaps are those that have the same characteristics, but which you can't see because of murky water or turbid water. Now, one thing we can be sure of, the minute you spear one of those fishes, the minute there is food in the water, the temperament of the average shark is going to change. I think that's been very well demonstrated by some experiments and some demonstrations that have been carried out at Sea Aquarium located in Miami, Florida. Now, at this installation, we can see the large shark channel which they have there. It's about a 1/4 of a mile in diameter. And this shark channel has in it several hundred sharks of perhaps a half a dozen different species. Most of them, by themselves, could be considered as harmless sharks. Some of them have rather lethal reputations, however. But under feeding activities such as this, it's a little bit difficult to differentiate between the so-called friendly sharks and those that have the lethal reputations. As you can see, the tremendous feeding excitement that goes on when there's a lot of food in the area, the normally docile shark becomes one that you have to watch out for. So the problem becomes then how to stop a hungry feeding shark from coming around in the area where you may happen to be. Well, we know certain things about sharks and their feeding. We know, for example, that if you put copper compounds into seawater, and this was worked out in controlling fish parasites. We know that these copper compounds affect the nostrils of the sharks. They clog the nostrils and prevent some sharks from feeding. Perhaps as a result of this, and also as a result of an extended test program, the Navy, during the last war, established a shark repellent which consisted of two materials. First of all, copper acetate, which was about 20%, and then the second material that was in there was a nigrosine dye, which was about 80%. Now, the theory of this was that the copper acetate would affect the nostrils of the shark and prevent the shark from being able to locate its victim or to determine that there was blood in the water, and the nigrosine dye would put a barrier, a sight barrier, reduce the visibility so that the person could not be seen in the water. Now, that theory worked very well on many of our American sharks. Unfortunately, there were some dumb sharks in other parts of the world that didn't understand this, and for those sharks, the shark repellent had no effect. So the point that we are at today is that we need a brand new universal shark repellent, a shark repellent that will work any place and on any kind of a shark. And as a result of the test programs that are being carried out right now, today, in many parts of the world, and will be continued for the next 3 or 4 years, I think that before long, a shark repellent of this kind will be available. But that is a report for the future. Thank you. For our Animal of the Week segment, we thought we'd find out something about the training program for guide dogs for the blind. And so we asked Don Madden from San Rafael if he'd come up and bring some of the types of dogs that they use in their training. Now, these obviously are all different colors. What kinds are they, Don?
Yes, they are. This is a Chesapeake Bay Retriever.
Chesapeake, and what's this one?
This is a yellow Labrador, one that you don't see too much. You see mostly the black Labs.
Yes.
And the German Shepherd.
Now, are all these dogs used in your training program, and do you have others?
Yes, they are. We also have boxers, we have German Shorthairs, and some Golden Retrievers.
Suppose I take 2 of these, and perhaps you could go through some of the training aspects with the other dog there.
Okay. We have simple obedience we give our dogs. First command of which is come. Vanessa, come. Good girl. And then, of course, the command down. Vanessa, sit. No, stay away. Down. Vanessa, sit. Sit. Come on, lady. Okay. Stay. Stay. One of the things they enjoy doing most is fetching. Vanessa, fetch. Oh, you can't get a hold of it? Good. Fetch. Fetch.
Now the dog makes a circle and comes back on your left side.
Yes, he does. He sits on the left side in position for you to remove the object.
How long does it take for your training program for your dog?
So the whole program is approximately 4 months.
4 months. Now, does that include the person who will use the dog as a guide?
No, there's 4 extra weeks in training the student and the dog, which makes about 5 months altogether.
Does the student come to your place every day? Does he actually live at the place?
He lives right at the place for 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you select the dogs, the general intelligence? I've heard it said that some dogs were not intelligent enough to handle these problems.
Well, we raise all our own dogs at Guide Dogs, and we have a puppy testing program that we put our dogs in, and we're able to screen them then and only use the good material.
Don, we want to wish you all the success in the world to your group of Guide Dogs of the Blind for the coming year.
Thank you very much.